Hello everyone. I'm here to announce our keynote speaker, Jennifer Morgan. Superintendent of Documents, Scott Matheson, joined the U.S. Government Publishing Office in October 2022 from Yale University. He has over 20 years of experience as a member of and working with the library community. Scott began his career as the depository coordinator at the Lillian Goldman Law Library at Yale Law School, then worked at the University of Colorado before returning to Yale University Library. More recently, he served as Associate Law Librarian for Technical Services at the Goldman Law Library. Scott is active in professional associations and has worked with the Preserving Electronic Government Information Project, which aims to ensure that born digital, web-based public information is preserved for future researchers. Scott taught a course in government information for 7 years at the University of Illinois Library School, and he represented the library community on GPO's Depository Library Council, serving as chair from 2016 until 2017. And Scott served on the GPO Director's Task Force on a Digital Federal Depository Library Program. Scott studied journalism at the University of Alaska and earned law and library degrees from the University of Washington and a master's in public administration from the University of Connecticut. Welcome, Scott.
Notes and my timer. PowerPoint, there we go. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for coming. And thanks to the State Librarian Spear, and thanks to Jennifer and the organizing committee for inviting me and being such great hosts for us today. Yesterday, Suzanne McManus and I, who are both here from GPO, got to go to Bloomington for the afternoon and had a tour of 2 depositories there, which was wonderful. And we got a great tour this morning before we started here, so I've seen 3 of the 28 depositories in Indiana now. And worked my way through the list. But it really is inspiring to be in a state that is so engaged in government information that you have a special day for it, and you gather together and want to learn more about how to connect your folks with government information, which is really why we're all here in this beautiful room, in this beautiful building, and exciting news that Archives and Library and History Association will all be together here for, again, better access for our patrons to these important resources. The core of what the FDLP has been from the beginning is exactly this connecting people to their government's information. The FDLP, we'll do a little bit of history in a moment, but came a little bit later. The Indiana State Library's record in our system actually says that their designation date, the date they became a depository, is undefined or unknown. And that's because as a state library, they were getting materials before the FDLP existed, and we are very proud that we have existed for a very long time. So you have a great resource in this library and in the collaboration that Brent and the staff here are able to lead and facilitate across the state. We'll talk more about collaboration as well as we move on. So what I'm going to talk about in broad strokes today is how did we get here? So we'll do a little bit of history and hopefully a little bit more recent history about how we got to where we are today. We'll talk a little bit about some of the details of where we are today. And then a little discussion on where we might go in the future, what opportunities we have now that we didn't have in the past, and what we can do for our patrons going forward. I'm going to talk about the digital FDLP. I put it on its own line there. And We haven't come up with a fancy new name or changed this because the FDLP is something that many of us believe in and have grown up with, and you heard Jennifer say I have been at this for 20 years and then some, and it's an important sort of signifier. So we're calling it digital FDLP. Some people are saying digital first FDLP or more digital or all digital FDLP. We'll talk through some of that, but the key is that there is less of a focus on printed materials and more of a focus on our digital materials and digital access. However, we are not getting rid of any of the print. You can be a digital depository going forward and keep all of the print. Anything that we have ever sent you, you can hold on to, and that is an important distinction when we're talking about digital FDLP. It does not mean that we're getting rid of the print. We're just not going to emphasize it going forward. So, I hope we'll go through some history and then you'll have some questions. So if you have questions as I'm going through either on history or on future, make a note and we will have time at the end, or we can talk at lunch. I'm happy to do that. The FDLP is an old program. We trace our roots back to 1814 when Congress first said, hey, we ought to send some of these documents for printing to the states so that they can know what's going on in Washington. And we'll also send them to the American Antiquarian Society in Worcester, and so they've got a set as well. So it goes back a long way, and many state libraries, and I've been to Virginia in the last year, which celebrated they're calling it their 200th anniversary, though they are making noises that they existed when they were a colony before there was a country, so they should really be more than 200. But and again, here today, where the library really predates this official program, this official congressional act. That 1814 system sort of toggled along until right at the Civil War is sort of when GPO was born. Our act is 1861. We opened for business on the first day of Abraham Lincoln's term, and in 1862, and that is sort of when GPO took over the printing. And that centralized the government's printing from lots of different contractors with lots of different quality. You can imagine in those days why a particular printing contractor might have gotten a job or might not have gotten a job. It might have had something to do with who they voted for or who they knew, not necessarily the quality of their work. But that was the problem that Congress wanted to solve with the centralization of printing. And in the government printing office, still GPO, but the government printing office at that time, in the 1860s. And that started to pull our publications together and make them much more uniform, and really is where we started to see a more uniform and regular publication and distribution of materials. At that point, the depository program was still run out of Interior, moved with the Printing Act in 1895 to GPO. So the FDLP has existed at GPO since 1895. And that's sort of moving from there forward is the program as we know it today, with a major change in the 1960s, and then a landmark change, but not a huge change to the bulk of the program in 1993, 1994. Some of these things along the timeline, you see the 1930s in there. So this is the 1930s business building. We know what happened in the 1930s as we were trying to recover from the Depression. A huge alphabet soup of government agencies at the federal level rose up, and all of these agencies needed to publish their rules and figure out what they were doing. There's great stories about how the Federal Register started, the Federal Register and the Code of Federal Regulations. There's stories about lawsuits against, agencies saying you violated these regulations, and the defendant saying, no, we didn't, and the judge saying, those regulations aren't even in force anymore, you need to get your act together and know what your actual rules are. So the Federal Register Act is another one of these 1930s era laws that caused a huge amount of printing for the government, and actually brought in a lot of executive branch printing into GPO. Prior to this, a lot of those of you who work with the historic serial set will know that a lot of the executive branch publications were delivered to Congress and then included in the serial set as congressional publications. So that really, there was a big change there in the 30s. Our current law that set up the regional and selective system that we know and love, those of us who work in depositories, that is from the 60s, and that is the law that largely we still operate under today in Title 44 of the U.S. Code. There have been numerous attempts to adjust that or overhaul it or make significant changes to it. Those continue, but the current law that we operate under is sort of from that very print-centric, very big library, let's fill up all the shelves era of government information. You also saw state programs obviously rise up sort of in parallel to the federal program, and your Indiana depository system sort of works in a similar way. There are systems with the UN and foreign governments and with other non-government entities, UN, Food and Agriculture Organization, EU. And all of these programs sort of started in the same general idea of distributing information from the producers to the people. And all of them are in slightly different places. Every state has a slightly different amount of print left or not left, as the case may be. All of the foreign and international programs are in varying degrees of digitization. We are in some ways a little bit behind with our change this February. I won't say late to the party because I'm not sure it's a party, but we have made the decision now towards the end of the trend with these similar programs. Just some other fun timelines. Microfiche was a way to solve when we realized, library shelves are finite, you can't keep adding more things to them. So we started producing things in microfiche. That set of microfiche, we have the masters. We know where the masters are. They live with other custodial agencies at the moment, but we have them. And we do have a complete set of those masters. And there are absolutely things in that set that we microfilmed and never distributed in print. So there are some unique objects in that set, and that is something we are certainly aware of and we keep in mind as we're planning. The other big change, so I said this was a landmark change but not a huge overhaul, is the GPO Access Act in the mid-90s. This brought along access. Some of us may remember the Federal Bulletin Board that preceded it slightly, and then evolved into the lovely waste servers that we know and love as GPO Access. And then evolved into FDSys and into today's GovInfo as the public interface to our document management and preservation system. So that law, again, 1994 in government terms, in publishing terms, maybe not that long ago. In internet terms, that's a long time ago. So that's also one of those sections at Chapter 41 that says we should have a system of online access. Okay, you can tell by the way it was worded, this was done a long time ago. That's another one that we keep an eye on, and when we think there's somebody who would be interested in making adjustments, we say, we could update this a little bit. So that those are the frameworks that we still operate under. In 2014, we got permission to say that the Superintendent of Documents got permission to say that you could be a depository library and not take anything tangible. For a long time, you had to still select those 2 item numbers, and you would get certain things that we thought every depository should have. But since 2014, we have had libraries join the program from scratch that have never gotten anything tangible in a box from Laurel. We have also had libraries say, we don't have room, or our patrons aren't demanding the print materials, so we're going to pull back and we're not going to select any tangible materials. We're only going to select online materials. So that's been the case for a decade now. And then the big change that if you work in a depository, I hope you heard about this this past winter, is the limited print distribution change. And what that does is pulls back on the amount of print. It was a substantial financial investment in what is largely a fixed budget for the program. And what that pullback allows us to do is, we think, balance the need for tangible copies in the system, in the National Federal Depository Library Program system, with our need to free up some of those printing and distribution resources to do more digital services that will reach more people and help more libraries. And help more libraries is sort of that's a little peek ahead at, if you are not an FDLP library, if you are I know somebody here said they were from a rural public library, if you are not in the FDLP, guess what? All of this digital stuff is also going to be available to you. Not necessarily the services around managing the collection, that is still a perk, a benefit, something that we're able to help our FDLP partners with, our FDLP libraries. But if you want to point your patrons at government information, our goal is to make all of that freely available for all patrons, whether they're in the FDLP or not. Let's see where we are at time. Good. So the recent developments, we talked about online access has changed names and continues to be something that we work on and continue to develop. We've introduced digital signatures. That happened again around 2014, 2016. This is a way to ensure authenticity, and it has sort of come up again because we've been getting questions about, what about AI? Well, this is one way, these digital signatures are one way for you and for your patrons to understand that what they're looking at, the file they have, hasn't been changed since GPO distributed the file to them. And so we have those digital signatures. We also realized we hadn't talked, some of us were there when we set this up, or in the community when we set this up, and we have all of this authentication and digital signature stuff, knowledge sort of built into our heads, and we haven't talked about it in a while. So we're going to do some talking about what those digital signatures mean, what the little eagle icon on those PDFs means, what it should represent to people, so that we can help people understand that real benefit. We started doing web harvesting quite a while ago. This is not unlike the Wayback Machine. We reach out and we say, this is a website that's in scope of the program. It's not really a PDF we can just grab and preserve. It's sort of a website that needs to live as a website, and we use the harvesting tools to grab that and then catalog it and make it available to the web archive. We've built GovInfo with digital preservation sort of top of mind, and that's now it's one of two now certified ISO 16363 repositories in the world. It's also Core Trust seal certified. So that may mean something to more of you than the ISO number. And this is something that we view as not just an outside group or groups coming in to check that we're doing the things that we need to do. We're using best practices to preserve the electronic content, but also a way for us to signal that this is ongoing work. Preservation is it's not a noun, it is a verb, right? You have to keep doing it constantly, especially digital preservation. You can't put things on the shelf and leave them for 20 years and come back to them and see how they're doing. You gotta touch them all the time. So that process continues, and that's sort of a way we make that very, we keep that top of mind for everybody in the agency, that this is really important. We've worked with civil society groups and with our partners on Capitol Hill to make sure that bulk access to the data that's in GovInfo is available, and that's available in lots of different ways. There are APIs, there are bulk downloads, there are lots of ways to get that data. Just this year, we did something very fast, and I'm really proud that we were able to do it. And in fairness, it was not me. It was Lori and the staff across GPO built the congressionally mandated reports portal. So Congress passed a law in December, at the end of December of 2022, and said by the end of December 2023, you have 1 year. You have to have this portal set up where you can display all of these required congressional reports. We require an agency to make a report to us on some topic. And we said, oh, great, where's the list of all the reports? And they said, there's a list of a lot of them, and then we're working with this. But also, we had to build a way for all the agencies to register and sign up and get approved and submit these reports to us. We had to do some training. We had to work with other across the government. So there was a lot of work to making what looks like another collection on GovInfo to the patrons, with these 300 plus reports in it already in the first 6 months. It looks like another collection on GovInfo, but there's a lot of moving pieces behind that, and it really is a great way for us to reach out to other agencies in the government and remind them, hey, even if you're not printing these reports with us, we still need them. They're still in the scope of our program and of our statute. So that's been a good success. We were able to bring the FDLP data manager up and make that available. This is, if you are from, some of you I know are familiar with the old DDM, the Documents Data Miner, and the Documents Data Miner 2 and 3 from our friends in Kansas. They graciously gave us the code, and our IT folks were able to bring that up and work on making sure that the data flows stay up to date in that, and now that's a great tool for helping to manage existing tangible collections in libraries. You can get a list of all the records for the things that we know we've sent you back to a certain date, and you can use these tools to get a list of things you should have received, rather than just here's a shipping list of everything that we sent to anybody this week. You can get a list that is only your selections. These data tools that help sort of with processing and some of the things as folks are looking at doing collection maintenance in their collections. We're also bringing up, we're aiming for late this year, a modern discovery interface to the catalog of government publications. Has anybody here tried to use MetaLib recently? That search across the government websites? I see very few hands, and I think that is representative of the use that tool has gotten. It's very long in the tooth. It's one of those things we sort of set up, and it was state of the art when we did it, but that was a long time ago, and now we're going to replace it with a more modern discovery layer that many of you may be familiar with. This will also allow us to have a little bit more flexibility in how we display the catalog of government publications data to you and to your patrons, to the world, and allow us to make some needed changes underneath the hood we have a very old ILS that runs the catalog of government publications, and that needs to be updated. And this is a way to sort of do that in a way that's less disruptive to the public. So that's sort of all coming up, where we are, where we've been. So we talked about digital FDLP. This came out of more than a few suggestions from Congress, from our oversight committees, the Joint Committee on Printing, and our House and Senate committees, suggesting you should do some digital stuff. You should make this program more digital. Do you really still have to print all this stuff? They've been saying this. Remember I said the GPO Access Act was 1993? So they've been saying this for 3 decades now. And they keep saying it, and we have taken them at their word. My new boss has said, he said in 2022, we're going to have a task force on a digital federal depository library program, and I want this group of experts from across the country, from federal libraries, from agency publishers, from GPO staff, and from depository libraries to answer 2 questions. Can we have a digital FDLP? Is it feasible? And should we? Is it something that we think is desirable and will meet the needs of the program objectives, the FDLP objectives, right? Connecting people with the information of their governments. Can we? Should we? So the task force met for almost a year, wrote a report at the end, and delivered that to the director of GPO last winter, and in March of 23, 2 winters ago, March of 23, he accepted that and said, yes, you should do this. And he said to me and to all of the people who do the actual work in the FDLP, in library services and content management, he said, yes, we're accepting this report, go ahead and make a digital FDLP. So that is why we've been working very hard for a year, and we've been doing a lot of consulting with outside folks. But we're using, among other things, and there's some cards on the Indigo table that talk about what is an digital FDLP, so you can go grab one of those, the blue postcards that are sort of smaller. But this is the definition that the task force came up with. And it should sound familiar to those of you who have worked in government information. So, a digital federal depository library program delivers permanent, no-fee, public access. So all of those things are things we already do, right? We just do them with print. To digital content, okay, so now we're going to do this with digital content. And essential support services. So there's two pieces. There's always been two pieces. There's the collection piece, the content, and the support to librarians and other people who help people find government information. Also, since we've been running GPO access to some extent directly to people, so some support for people directly, and you'll see that in things like the FDLP research guides. So this is our LibGuides, and we have them, librarians help develop them, and depository librarians certainly point their patrons to them. But it's also something that the public can access directly in order to try and help understand the content. So we'll continue to refine. This definition probably doesn't need to continue to be tweaked, but we'll continue to refine what digital FDLP means and continue to take input on that. The really important thing is that we're continuing to take, we've asked for input and we're continuing to take input from the community on what it is you need and what you'd like to see. This fall, you will see a broad framework that will talk about the services that GPO provides to FDLP libraries and how those services will be delivered to the libraries. So we've talked a little bit about the collection piece, and we've been doing that since GPO access. We know sort of what that looks like. Now we're going to talk about the services and how the services are going to evolve, and that'll come up this fall. So, what's a digital FDLP? It's the libraries in the program, it's the program itself. It's 30 years in the making. This is a gradual change that's been happening, and we've reached this tipping point now. At a high level, the digital FDLP connects the public with the government information they need and puts digital permanent public access first. Oh, I blanked it out. It's okay. Puts digital permanent public access first while recognizing the importance of the existing tangible collection, right? So access primarily digital, but we are in a building that houses an unbelievable historic collection of tangible government information, and that will not stop. That will not change. We will do different, hopefully better things, potentially, with some of those tangible collections. We will continue to convert them to digital format so that they can be preserved. But that will continue, right? So there's a tangible collection and this growing digital collection, but they are not mutually exclusive. The digital change allows us to collaborate in new ways with more partners. Somebody talked to me in the lobby. More partners beyond just the FDLP libraries, beyond just those 1,100 libraries. But also with information producers, so with the agencies who publish. So we're interested not just in their publications, we're interested in their data because you're interested in their data. We want to know what it is they're producing. It also allows us to use technology to improve access to collections. That's digitization mostly. A lot of metadata work, better discovery, helping people find those collections, but also digital services. So that's not just, I have a room full of catalogers who catalog all of this government information and produce MARC records and put them in OCLC, and that's it. It is, I have a room full of metadata specialists who make sure that that information that they are producing at public expense ends up in all the places that you may want to look for it and use it in your library. And if your library is at a place where loading MARC records every month is not for you, doesn't serve your patrons as well, great. We will help figure out how to get that metadata to you so that your patrons can discover what we need. I can imagine that there are metadata workflows that already exist for a lot of your electronic materials in your libraries already, and there's as far as I can see, no reason we shouldn't put our metadata in those same workflows so that you can turn on a database A, database B, and database GPO, catalog of government publications, and people can search things that way, and you wouldn't have to necessarily load records all the time. We don't have to keep doing these old workflows if they don't work for the libraries anymore. Now, the catalog of government publications is 1 million bib records. It's big, it's a lot. Maybe you don't want all of that. Maybe you're in a smaller library and you just want Indiana government, federal government information. Well, if you're a cataloger in the room, I am not a cataloger. I get to work with a lot of catalogers, and when I was head of tech services, I had catalogers who worked with me. There's an 043 field that says what geographic area this material is about, right? Well, we can say, show me all the Indiana 043s, put them in a file, and you can turn them on, you can load them, you can do that. Maybe you want everything about a particular topic. Maybe you're particularly interested in food safety. Well, tell us the subject headings, we'll make you a set of records, and you can load those into your catalog. So lots of options going forward as we think about these digital transformations, not just on the collection side. That's easy to think about, right? GovInfo is something most of us know and love to hate, but use. It's a great system that does what it is designed to do. Can we improve it? Let's find out. All of this digital transformation ends up serving America Informed, so that good GPO motto, right? America Informed. It's the connecting your patrons, your people, with the information of their government. That's where we're headed. And it's a change that we really, as I said, has been happening for a long time. This is not new. There's been a little sort of inflection point, and that was a little jarring for a lot of us, but this is not new. We've been doing this. We have this. And what it allows us to do, really, is convert the program from something that was about coming to a library, looking at tangible documents, and if you didn't have an FDLP close to you, you had to travel. You had to come to Indianapolis, you had to go to South Bend, you had to go to Bloomington to use these materials. Now you'll be able to use them with your patrons in your library as they are digitized, as new material comes out and is preserved and made findable in a digital format. So it expands all of our ability to do this work. It's a lot of change, right? Been doing it a long time, but it's a lot of change. And we didn't wait on a couple of the recommendations in the task force report. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've done since then. A lot of you know that, but one of the really big changes is the limits on print distribution. Some of you are intimately, overly familiar probably with the details of all of this. But what happened is, for everybody else in the room, in the old days, any depository could essentially say, I want almost any title, any item number that GPO produces, a collection of materials. And we would mail it to them in a big cardboard box once a week, twice a week. When your box got full, we sent it to your library. Great. We have changed that from thousands of lines of opportunities to select items to there are about 9 titles right now that any library can select and that will be delivered in print, because we had experts look at this and they said these are the titles that people need to be able to use in print, that libraries want to have in print, that are really keen or that don't have digital equivalents, or that really are just better to use in print. So that's a really small collection of titles, but they're really core titles. It's the United States Code. It's the statutes at large. It's the Nautical Almanac and the Astronomical Almanac. All of these titles that are, sort of standby government documents, those are available for any FDLP library to continue to select. There's another chunk of about 40, 45 titles It changed as we were going through because a couple of them actually, the agencies decided to stop publishing them as we were trying to implement this. And we found out, oh, that's not going to be published anymore. We can't offer it to you. So this other chunk of about 40 titles, those are limited to either 50 copies or 20 copies for FDLP libraries to select. And that's 20 copies not for Indiana, that's 20 copies for the whole country. So in order to make sure that these copies are distributed in a reasonable, rational way, we divided the country up into 4 National Collection Service areas. The Midwest National Collection Service area is where we are. And we made sure that as we divided up these limited numbers of copies, that they were divided as equally as possible between the NCSAs, and that every NCSA had at least one library getting 1 copy. And I can tell you, unless something has changed since I last looked, at least every NCSA has at least 2 libraries getting a tangible copy of every one of those titles. And that's very unusual. That I think there's 2 titles where there's only 2 and 1. It's usually pretty evenly divided among the 4 areas. And yes, we looked at geography, we looked at the population density, we looked at the number of libraries. There was a large process, which we can talk about later if you want, about how this actually happened, how we did this, how we asked the libraries to rank what they thought was important when we made these decisions. So that's the print in the program now, is the 9 titles that anybody can ask for. And some of them have 400, 500, 600 libraries asking for them. So there's still a large number of copies of some of these unlimited titles. And then those 40-some titles where there's either 50 copies or 20 copies. And that is the print that remains going forward in the FDLP. Everything else is online. So we are really focusing on capturing a lot of material upstream as it is being produced digitally. So we've added some new content. And these are, I'm going to talk about these just because they're examples of how content gets to you in the digital FDLP. So, from agencies as they decide to print. So the FCC record is a telephone book-sized publication, 8.5 by 11. It comes out every 2 weeks, every month, depending on how the commission is feeling. But it's a lot. This is going to be more than a shelf a year. This is going to be 2 or 3 shelves a year, probably. This is a big publication. And a lot of folks still wanted it. It's one of our limited print distribution titles, so we still are distributing some copies of it. It's one where we ran out of people who were interested in it. Sort of the number of libraries that wanted this in print was the same as the number of copies we had available. But it's never been available online from GPO. We have a partnership with the University of North Texas where they would get a copy, they would cut it up, digitize it, and put it in their repository. So from 1984 when it started until 2021, it's in the UNT repository, and we have a partnership agreement with them, a legal agreement, understanding that if anything happened, they decide they don't want to keep it anymore, we will take it. It's safe. We feel like that's there. But we talked to some folks at the commission and said, you're printing this through GPO, and you send a PDF to the printer, they make some changes and then produce the printed document, and send the PDF back to you. Could we get a copy of that PDF? Would you let us put it up in GovInfo? And it was a long discussion, and some staff folks spent a lot of time holding hands of higher-ups and lawyers and getting an agreement in place. And now we have the FCC record natively on GovInfo, and it's available. And it's not something that you're necessarily going to download and read of an evening. Even practitioners in this area use a database that the commission maintains to find things. But in order to cite them legally, they have to use the FCC record pagination. So this is a service for people who want to be able to see what those citations are, or who want to be able to cite things to the correct pagination. So the FCC record is one example, and the key here is agencies are doing this stuff digitally, and if we can get in touch with them and talk to them, get the right agreement in place, we can take their content and put it in GovInfo, make sure it's cataloged and findable for all of your folks. We'll expand the collection. The next thing is, we talked a little bit about agreements or collaborations, an agreement with agencies that run their own repositories. So we can all think of the really big health sciences one, right? With PubMed Central. Okay, so we haven't tackled that, the 800-pound gorilla yet, but we did talk to the NOAA Central Library. They run a repository of the research that the NOAA scientists produce. And what our agreement with them is that they will provide us the metadata for that repository. We will make sure that metadata is part of the catalog of government publications, the national bibliography, and we will point people to their repository because we looked at how they're running their repository and what guidelines they're following, and we feel like we can trust that. Again, there's an agreement that if they are planning to shut that down at some point in the future, we have a period where we can take the content and host it ourselves. So that's just another way, is agencies are doing the work, and rather than redo the work and spend more taxpayer money to do the same information, we're going to point at that. And you heard me say metadata and catalog of government publications, but remember, we're putting a discovery layer on that, so maybe these end up as MARC records in the catalog of government publications, but really they're mostly journal articles and white papers, and that's not the sort of thing we normally put in a MARC record in a catalog, right? That's the sort of thing we often put in a discovery layer, and we have a different metadata database for those materials. I don't know what we're doing with this yet. There are people who do this for a living who work for me and who are smarter about it than I am, but we're starting to have these flexibilities. Again, Digital First FDLP lets us rethink some of these things that we've always done. This is also a great way to get a lot of content really fast, because that's a big repository. NOAA is very productive. We're also getting from FDLP libraries who are converting their historic print collections, because those of you who are not in the FDLP community may not know this. GPO doesn't have a collection. So we are librarians without a collection. We have our collection is the National Collection of U.S. Government Public Information, which is held here and at Bloomington and at Notre Dame and at Stanford and at Washington. All of these depositories, that's our collection, and it's all held by you all. So that is our collection, and if we want to scan something, Suzanne will talk about some of her partnerships and collaborations that involve getting materials from other libraries so that we can scan them. However, some libraries scan their own things. There's a great scanning lab in this building, and Brent is scanning the decisions of the Department of the Interior. It's a big long title. General Land Office records. Genealogists love those, right? So this is great. And what he's doing is he's scanning them, makes an access copy available in his own systems, but sends the master files, the really big chunky files, to GPO. We put them in our preservation repository to preserve them so that we can do that work and pay for the disk space and all those things. That then lets him spend more time scanning or doing other work rather than worrying about how to pay for storing big files. So it's a partnership where everybody gets a little bit of something, but it's a great way for us to get especially those little hidden gems. And I know a lot of your collections have things that if you look in the vocab don't have little black dots next to them. They weren't distributed by the FDLP. And they're only in your collection because some acquisitions person, some librarian, some curator wrote to the agency and said, put me on your mailing list. So all of those little gems that are missing, we want to know the metadata, and we've talked about that. But we also, that would be a great target for scanning, because you could scan those and make them available, again, to everybody in the country through a collaboration with us if you need that support. So, others as we go forward. But these are sort of the three models which are really, really helpful, I think, to think about how we get things into the program. So, we talked about tangible collections, we talked about converted digital collections, so that's our old stored tangible collections that we're converting. Captured digital publications, so this is the FDLP web archive, and we need to grab a whole website. It's also, as our catalogers find, or as you report through AskGPO, publications that you find on a website, things that look like a PDF, that look like a book. If you printed them out, you could make a document of them. If you report those, or we find them, we will grab them, catalog them, and put them into GovInfo. This is a relatively new development that we're able to push them through to GovInfo. We had a collection of about 50,000 of these documents that were sort of parked in a staging area inside GPO that we knew about, and we could get to if we needed to, but it wasn't ideal. Some of them had pearls that you could sort of get to them, maybe. This is a much better solution, and it's a way that we automate this quarterly. We push these things that the catalogers have found either on their own or because you're reporting them. We push them through to GovInfo with metadata, and then those records also, of course, show up in OCLC with pearls on them, and you will be able to use those. So that's a couple different ways we capture digital publications. We have tools like the FDLP Data Manager and FDLP Exchange now. Look for more digital tools to be coming. The Catalog of Government Publications is a separately funded program in my department, and it is, the FDLP is one big chunk, and the Catalog of Government Publications is another big chunk, the cataloging and indexing program. So that is going to continue. It's going to become more robust, and we're going to give you better tools. Hopefully some opportunities for collaboration there as well. Because I have a lot of catalogers, but no one has enough catalogers, right? Any tech services person will tell you there are never enough catalogers. Always need more catalogers. And we can collaborate. And then tools to support librarians. And again, more details on this in the fall, but you know and love the FDLP Academy and the FDLP resource guides that I mentioned. Look for more of these kinds of tools going forward. So, we're going to keep building the shared collection. We're going to keep the tangible collection and manage it by National Collection Service Area. So we're going to have 4 areas to try and manage these shared collections, this collaborative collection management. We've set up some committees to work on that. If you're interested in how that's going, we can tell you at GPO, or you can ask your Indiana representative in the Midwest Steering Committee, who's right here in the front row. We'll also continue to bring up more tools and more collaborations that focus on the digital, that are less focused on the print, or are focused on converting the print to the digital, to make it available to everybody, whether you're in a depository library or not, whether you have room to store a beautiful historic collection like this library does, or whether you're in a space-constrained place. You heard me talk about microfilm. I've now been in a couple libraries in the last few months, and I've seen a lot of microfilm cabinets that are full of not such high-quality fiche, but it's really important at the moment. But boy, if all that was online and cataloged and easy to find, would you want to keep those microfilm cabinets, or might you want to find something else to do with that space? I don't know. Just, it's not going to happen. The other thing I've learned, it's not going to happen next year. So this is a plan. This is a long-term plan, but we will continue working on this. Also, tools that will help manage the historic collection, like the MoCat metadata that we were able to get from ProQuest, making that available, searchable, so that then you can use the really nicely digitized MoCats in GovInfo in conjunction with that really robust search feature. If you're doing things like trying to figure out what the SUDOC number was when this was issued, or why is this shelved here instead of there. I don't want to step on Kate's, on the person who's working this toes too much, but the modern services will improve access and look for more of these. Again, that framework plan will be available in the fall. We will be talking about it a lot, and you can certainly have some input once we've got it out. But it's the patron tools like Discovery, making government information a first-class citizen in among all your other resources in your libraries. Training for you and for your staff and your students, anybody who you want to be able to find and use government information, but making sure we do that for government information in any format, not just the print. And then collection management and preservation support. So we talked about GPO doesn't have a collection in Washington. We have the collection that is in all of your libraries, and we know that libraries have different levels of support or ability to do preservation and conservation work. we are part of this service framework will be that preservation services as well. Here's the map of the National Collection Service areas, just in case you wanted to know. But you're right there. There you go. And I know we have some folks from other states as well. If you happen to have come up from Kentucky, you're in the South, but the South National Collection Service area. But I think everybody else who might be visiting will be in the Midwest as well. So that's what's going on with the National Collection Service areas. Some of the questions that have come up, I'll mention them, and then if they continue to be questions after my brief, ask them again. What about regionals? So if we have these 4 areas, what about regionals now? Regionals are still here. They're in the statute. The collection distinction that a regional used to get everything, which most regionals will tell you was maybe not always entirely accurate. And when did they become a regional? So the collection distinction has largely gone away as we have more and more digital content, and the material going forward will be digital. In that sense, as of today, every library has a regional collection, right? Because all of the digital material is available to all the libraries. We're not putting barriers in front of it. But you have it as of today forward, not today backwards. So today backwards is where your regionals and your other large historic depositories with robust collection will continue to serve that role that they have always served. The other thing that regionals do, and I didn't always know this, when I started as a selective coordinator, I didn't know this. Regionals do a huge amount, not just of collection management, reviewing your discard lists, but also of building community and bringing people together, training, helping folks work together within the region like we're doing today. So this is something you are really lucky in, that you've got a regional who is really good at this and is good at reaching out to folks to bring people together and put this together. That won't change. That will need to continue to happen, and in fact, I think is even more important going forward. So that part of regionals won't change. Some of the details too on what's done at the NCSA level and what's done at the regional level will be worked out or fleshed out, made more detailed by the NCSA steering committee. So again, Brent is going to take that on, and other folks will be able to rotate onto those committees as the terms end as well. So that's in process, but I think we have a vision, and I think largely from what I've heard from the steering committees, we're sort of all on the same page of where we need to go. Another question we have is collaborations. We were calling these partnerships for a long time, and we still have partnerships, and those are the official GPO partnerships. Collaborations we're using as a broader term, and there's going to be more talk about this as well. Suzanne, of course, will be happy to give you lots of details on this at 3 o'clock in her session, specifically on collaborations. But this is, again, I talked about we need to work not just with libraries, not just with FDLP libraries. We can't just talk to the 1,100 depository coordinators or the 600 depository coordinators who show up to the meetings and the webinars. We need to talk to all libraries. We need to talk to people who are not in libraries, but who help people find government information. Our clerks, like we had this morning on the law panel, anybody who is in these roles where people are looking for information, we should be able to at least connect with them, right, as collaborations potentially. And some of these may just be, hey, we exist, we're here, here's some literature. What do you do? Oh, okay, I understand how you help people, and that's enough. Some of them will be really robust, detailed collaborations, like we're going to take you the metadata from your repository and make it available in this way, and if you change this in the repository, you have to give us this much. All of that layer detail that goes into those agreements. Some of them will be very detailed like that. Some of them will be less detailed. But broadening our stakeholders, somebody suggested to me, let's go to the folks who are using this data at their professional associations. The PEGI group that Jennifer mentioned did a little bit of that, but I think there's room for a lot more of reaching out to historians, social scientists, data scientists, people who are going to use this. Also, they tend to have money for grants, so if they want our data that's sitting on our shelves in our books, maybe they would pay to digitize them, and then we could also grab that and make them available to everybody else. So these sort of outreach opportunities to agencies, to collaborators, to other folks are going to be a big part of how we do this going forward, because I think as all of the people who are in really big libraries know, you can't do this by yourself. This is only possible with collaboration. So that's definitely something that is coming up in the future. Similarly, sharing expertise, a great way to collaborate within our community, but also outside our community. We talked about metadata, talked about preservation. We are a NARA, GovInfo is a NARA affiliate repository, so we take, not only do we take preservation seriously, we have NARA looking over our shoulder, making sure we're doing it to the right standard. I think we're sort of at a point where I will just close by saying, remember, we started with the history of this. We've been at this FDLP thing, this federal government information distributed to folks for a very long time. And we've been at this digital thing longer than most of our colleagues. I think the lawyers beat us with Lexis, but we've been doing this since the 90s. It's been 30 years for some of us who've been around that long. So it's not new. It's just change that we're continuing. I think we're probably more than halfway there. I think especially after this past winter where we were really able to cut down on the print and free up that resource in the agency to provide better digital services. I think we're more than halfway there. I'm sure we're not finished. I'm not sure we're close to finished, but we're making progress. And the staff at GPO have done unbelievable work, most of it before I was there. I mean, I've been there 2 years, almost. They've been working on this for a very long time and doing a really amazing job in some tricky circumstances sometimes. But all of you have been doing the same thing. And learning new digital versions of resources, connecting your patrons to this new electronic stuff, figuring out where print has gone, figuring out how to include the digital items in your teaching and in your collection. The changes are not really new. They're not going to stop. Sorry. But they're changes in how we deliver this program that we all believe in. They are not changes in what the program is. They're not changes in the goal. We're still about permanent public access. We're still about connecting people to their government's information. It's still America informed. We're just doing it in a different way. So that's what I've got for you. I am happy to take questions. I also realize I'm between you and lunch, so I'm also happy to chat over lunch as you prefer. Questions or want to talk to the staff who know the details and all of this?
I have one
Jennifer,
question.
yeah.
Is GPO looking at how to support federal depository libraries in providing digital services, as you said, to underserved communities?
We are, Council, we are. Are we looking at providing support to libraries to serve underserved communities? Yes. Council, the Federal Depository Library Council has a standing committee, a working committee on underserved populations and unique challenges and underserved populations, thank you, which looks at this sort of in an ongoing way and continues to make recommendations or propose, discuss things with council, and council makes recommendations as they deem appropriate. We have had the FCC come in and talk about E-rate. We've had folks. We've tried to do what we can. The standard disclaimer is GPO is not a grant-making agency, and we do not have gift authority, so we can't take money, we can't give money. We can give services. So if you have a collections issue that involves a barrier to access for your collection, contact us, and we will see if there's something that we might be able to do. Can we reorder our digitization priority? Can we figure out, connect you with another partner library that may be able to help that out? In terms of digital divide, there is relatively little that we can do directly, but we can continue to talk about the importance of this, especially as we're putting more eggs in that digital basket, right? We want to make sure that the folks who need that access do have it. Yeah, oh, there's another, excellent, great.
You talked about microfilm or microfiche, which is one of the most difficult formats. But of course, I worry about the math. And I am assuming that under, I think it was number 2 bullet, that you are working with USGS to make sure all that metadata is fed into.
Maps is tricky, and GIS data is somewhat unique, but Maps is another constituency that we have a lot of folks involved in, and a large number of those limited print materials that we're still distributing are in fact cartographic material because we didn't think there was an appropriate. They're not in the National Atlas. They're not in the usual suspect places that you would look for federal government cartographic data. So those are continuing. Those are some of the ones that are continuing in print. I will tell you, I did look at some of these materials, these item numbers, and there's not a lot being distributed on them. So I'm a little concerned that the agencies aren't, in fact, producing some of these cartographic materials, at least not in print. Maybe they're using the data in-house and not necessarily producing it in print. So I think Maps is something we're going to have to continue to keep an eye on. It's one of those things that we are aware of, and I was thrilled to see the digitization room upstairs can do giant maps, giant posters, and I know that we do have, when we were doing the distribution, the print distribution titles, we did have libraries say, we share a space with the map department, or the maps are in my department, and we can scan maps for ILL at high resolution and send them in chunks if they need to, however they need it. So we had people who were volunteering to take these materials who can still make them available to the rest of the depository program. So I think there's some, again, these collaborations, these partnerships, and these leveraging our strengths and our expertise will be one of the ways that we address these knotty problems of things like GIS data, things like the BLS data that gets revised, and we needed what it said on this date, not what it said on this date. There's a couple of these pockets that I think each area knows their own little pocket of questionable data. But continue to raise those issues. If you have those pockets of data or pockets of weird publications you know about, let us know. Make sure we know about it too. Our collection development folks are really amazing, and I suspect they know the details of these much better than I do. But do let us know if you come across those.